Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to what matters in today's global landscape. Our mission is always to get you well-informed, quickly, and thoroughly. Today, we're dissecting a fascinating stack of recent news sources, pulling vital insights from across the editorial, science, and tech sections. We've got 5 key stories that collectively paint a picture of current global challenges and, well, human ingenuity too. Let's jump right in, starting with a crucial editorial titled, Strategies to Halt Maternal Deaths in India. Okay, let's unpack this. The article opens with a really stark statistic. In India, for every 1 lakh women who have a safe delivery, 93 still lose their lives in childbirth. This figure, the maternal mortality ratio, or MMR, for 2019-21, it does show a positive trend, actually. It's down from 1 to 3 in the 2017-19 period.
Yeah, so there's progress, but, still a significant number. It's important to be clear on what counts as a maternal death here. The source defines it very specifically. Death while pregnant or within 42 days of the pregnancy ending from causes related to or aggravated by the pregnancy itself, not accidental causes.
Right, that specificity is key for targeting interventions.
Exactly.
And what's really striking, as you mentioned, is how uneven this problem is across India. The article groups states into Empowered Action Group, EAG states, Southern states, and other states. The difference in MMR is huge. Kerala, for instance, is down at just 20. Amazing.
It's really remarkable.
But then you look at Madhya Pradesh at 175 or Assam at 167.
That's an almost 9-fold difference. It really points to deep systemic issues.
So what are those underlying issues? The article talks about the 3 delays, right?
That's right. A framework from Deborah Main back in '92, which India actually uses in its safe motherhood training. The first delay is about recognizing danger signs and deciding to seek care. Things like inertia, cost, family deciding.
The initial hurdle.
Precisely. But the article notes real positive change here. Empowered local mothers, women's self-help groups, and the ASAN A&M health worker networks set up since 2005 under the NRHM.
Ah, the Rural Health Mission.
Yeah, they've made a difference. Plus, financial incentives have, encouraged more women to choose institutional deliveries.
That makes sense. Empowering communities, making it financially viable.
Absolutely. Then comes the second delay. Transportation.
Getting to the facility.
Yeah, imagine being in a remote village, hours away, maybe needing an overnight journey. It's a massive challenge.
Tragically, some women don't make it.
Exactly. But here, too, the 108 ambulance system and other emergency transport under the National Health Mission have helped.
Okay, so progress on the first 2 delays. But the third one...
The third delay. This happens at the health facility. The article calls it unpardonable.
Strong words.
And justified, it seems. Delays in the ER, reaching the obstetrician, getting blood donors, lab issues, the operating theater not ready, no anesthetist. The list goes on.
It sounds like a systemic failure point.
It really points to the state of India's first referral units, or FRUs. Only about half the community health centers meant to be FRUs actually are.
And even those
face a 66% specialist vacancy rate and a critical lack of blood banks. That's a huge bottleneck in emergency care.
So what are the biggest medical killers in these situations?
Postpartum bleeding is number 1. Often the uterus doesn't contract properly after delivery, leading to massive blood loss shock, especially if the mother's already anemic.
Which requires immediate blood, immediate surgery.
Critically. Then there's obstructed labor, often seen in, stunted or malnourished young mothers. That needs a C-section.
Which needs a fully equipped OT, the surgeon, the anesthetist, all the things that might be delayed.
Exactly. And beyond those, you have hypertensive disorders, infections like sepsis, especially from unsafe home deliveries or crude abortions, and other illnesses common in EAG states, like malaria or TB.
So, given all that, what's the strategy forward?
The article stresses the basics. Early registration for pregnancy, routine antenatal checkups, and ensuring delivery happens in a facility.
And it holds up the Kerala model.
Yes, their confidential review of maternal deaths. It's held up as an example for other states. Their practices are apparently very advanced, using things like uterine artery clamps, managing complex emergencies energetically.
So it's about systems and commitment.
I think that's the core message. It shows that if the will is there, proactive interventions are limitless. It's about continuous review, adaptation, and commitment.
Okay, from maternal health, let's pivot to another critical issue impacting lives and rights. Climate-induced displacement in India. We're looking at an article called India's Climate Exodus. It frames climate change on India's coastline not just as environmental, but as a profound social and economic rupture. Communities relying on farming, fishing, coastal ecosystems, they're being pushed out. Rising seas, salt water getting into farmland, plus unregulated development. The example given is Satabaya in Odisha, literally being swallowed by the sea. Villagers relocated to government colonies that aren't really sustainable.
And it's not just Odisha. The article mentions similar patterns in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Kerala. It's widespread. And what's making it worse, according to the piece, is industrial expansion. Things like port development under the Sagarmala program, energy projects, commercial fish farming.
How do they make it worse?
They often involve clearing natural buffers, mangroves, sand dunes, wetlands, the very things that used to offer some protection.
So removing the natural defenses.
Exactly. It just compounds the vulnerability, both ecological and social.
And the human cost. Where do these displaced people go?
Often into really precarious urban informal work. Construction, brick kilns, domestic work in big cities like Mumbai, Chennai, often with little support.
Which raises the question of their rights.
A huge question. The article points to systemic exploitation debt bondage, where families get trapped by wage advances, plus a lack of legal protection under India's current labor laws for informal workers. And specifically for women in domestic work, there's heightened risk of abuse, underpayment, trafficking.
It sounds incredibly vulnerable. And the legal side seems lacking too.
That's what the article calls the legal lacunae. Article 21 of the Constitution guarantees the right to life and dignity, sure, but there's no specific law for people displaced by these slow-onset climate disasters.
Not like a sudden flood or earthquake.
Right. Existing laws like the Disaster Management Act or coastal zone rules, they're limited. Often, development seems prioritized over community rights. They just don't grapple with this slow-burn displacement.
So the legal framework hasn't caught up.
It seems not. The Supreme Court has recognized the environment-human rights link in judgments, but translating that into strong, community-focused laws for climate displacement, that's lagging.
But it's not all bleak. The article mentions resilience.
Yes, it does highlight grassroots movements.
Yeah.
People protesting against destructive projects, like the Adani ports or the Save Satapaya campaign.
But facing challenges.
Definitely. Environmental defenders often face intimidation, the article notes.
So what's the path forward suggested in the piece?
It calls for a proper rights-based framework, recognizing climate migrants in policies migration, urban planning, guaranteeing basics like decent work, housing, healthcare, also revising labor codes to protect them specifically, and managing coastal zones with sustainability and community rights front and center, not just commercial interests.
It sounds like a fundamental rethinking is needed.
I think so. The article basically argues our current laws are playing catch-up with the reality of climate displacement. Protecting these rights isn't just environmental, it's a test of India's democratic values.
Right. Let's shift now to the global climate stage. Moving from the editorial to the science section, we look at the recent Bonn climate talks. The article calls them a pressure test before COP30 in Brazil. And it sounds like, well, it wasn't smooth sailing.
Not at all. Delays, deep disagreements, mounting frustration, that's the summary, especially over procedures and, the perennial issue, climate finance.
What happened with procedures?
Even just adopting the agenda got bogged down. The like-minded developing countries' LMDCs, including India, they insisted on, including Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement.
That's the one about developed countries providing finance.
Yes, and it also touches on things like carbon border taxes, which developing countries see as unfair trade measures. Developed nations resisted putting it on the agenda there, arguing finance was discussed elsewhere. Result: deadlock.
Highlighting those persistent divides.
Absolutely.
Another big focus was the global goal on adaptation. Right. Trying to figure out how to track progress.
Yes, a huge task. They were trying to consolidate thousands of potential indicators down to maybe 100 or so to track adaptation actions globally.
The disagreement there, too.
On whether to include finance indicators for adaptation. Developing countries argued that without them, adaptation goals are just an unfunded mandate, asking them to adapt without the resources.
While others pushed back.
Countries like Japan and Australia resisted, including those specific finance metrics in the adaptation goal itself.
Okay, what about mitigation? The Mitigation Work Program, MWP.
That also saw debate. Should it be just the safe space for talking, or should it push for more ambition?
And the developing countries' perspective.
They emphasized, look, many of us have ambitious national targets and NDCs, but we lack the money and tech support to actually meet them. Ambition needs means of implementation.
And loss and damage. The Warsaw Mechanism Review.
Some proposals came up, but again, funding gaps and questions about how the Santiago network for technical assistance would actually operate, they clouded consensus.
What was India's stance there?
India, with other developing nations, called for easier access to technical support and, crucially, more funding to deal with the losses and damages already happening from climate change.
Seems like finance was the elephant in every room.
Pretty much. The article says it loomed large across almost every negotiation track. Big disagreements on grants versus loans, public versus private funds.
And who pays?
Exactly. How to share the burden of raising the estimated $1.3 trillion needed annually. Developing countries want transparency and action on systemic barriers blocking their access to finance.
So, the takeaway from Bonn.
Incremental technical progress, maybe, but the core political fights over equity and finance still very much unresolved.
Politics determines the pace, as the article concludes.
Seems that way.
All right, moving now to the text section. First, an analysis of West Asia's nuclear order, focusing on Israel and Iran. It kicks off discussing Israel's surprise strikes on Iran back in June. The author suggests this might have been Netanyahu trying to distract from the crisis in Gaza.
An interesting political interpretation.
The article argues Israel's core goal is simple: remain the only nuclear power in the region. Netanyahu, it says, believes only the Libyan model. Complete dismantling is acceptable for Iran's program, preferably with regime change.
Which explains his opposition to the JCPOA deal.
Exactly, because it allowed Iran limited enrichment.
The piece also talks about Iran's miscalculations. Apparently, U.S. intelligence, as recently as March, assessed Iran wasn't building a weapon.
Giving them false confidence.
Perhaps misplaced confidence, as the article puts it. But then came a damaging IAEA report in May, criticizing Iran's lack of cooperation and noting its stockpile of 60% enriched uranium had nearly doubled to over 400 kilograms.
A worrying development.
Very. And the article suggests Iran also underestimated Mossad's reach within its systems.
Then the U.S. got involved directly.
Right. The article states the U.S. anticipated Israel's move. After the Israeli strikes, President Trump ordered follow-up strikes on June 22nd. B-2 bombers, Tomahawk missiles.
Leading to Trump declaring the 12-day war over after some token Iranian retaliation.
Quite a sequence of events.
So the outcomes. Israel claimed victory. Trump said underground sites were obliterated. Gulf states were relieved.
And for Iran's supreme leader, the article suggests regime survival was a victory in itself, despite significant losses of personnel and hardware.
What about the U.S. and Israeli positions now? Still aligned?
Broadly, yes, both agree Iran can't get a bomb. But Netanyahu wants to deny Iran any nuclear capability at all, which might be a step further than the U.S. position.
The article speculates Trump, having backed Israel militarily, might now expect Iran to be more open to a deal.
An interesting dynamic to watch.
Stepping back, Iran's nuclear ambitions aren't new, are they?
No, the program dates back to the 50s. They joined the NPT in 1970. The article argues that Iran's current conventional weakness proxies hit hard. Missile tech found wanting actually makes a nuclear deterrent more important for them.
Regardless of the regime.
Even if there is a change of regime, the article suggests, it's seen as a strategic necessity.
But big questions remain. The extent of the damage, what happens to that 400-kilogram stockpile?
And Iran cutting off IAEA inspector access. The piece ends by invoking Thomas Schelling's successful coercion needs both a credible threat and credible reassurance. Finding that balance in West Asia is the challenge.
Okay, our final deep dive today, also from the text section, takes us to space. On the Golden Dome, how Trump's missile shield tests space law. It starts with this idea of an impenetrable shield, an old dream, now potentially going orbital with Trump's Golden Dome.
Right. This initiative, unveiled in May 2025 apparently, is a $175 billion space-based missile shield.
A constellation of satellites with interceptors.
Potentially kinetic weapons, maybe directed energy, to protect the U.S. from missile attacks. And the immediate legal flashpoint is Article 4 of the Outer Space Treaty from 1967.
The one banning nukes in space.
Exactly. It bans nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction. But because it focuses explicitly on WMDs, there's this argument it leaves a loophole for conventional weapons in space.
And the term peaceful purposes in the treaty is also debated.
Very much so. Different countries interpret it differently regarding military activities.
Here's where the article makes a key argument, though. Even if these interceptors aren't WMDs, technically.
Their practical outcome must always take precedence over the technical details. That's the quote.
Meaning?
If these interceptors can take out missiles or other satellites, they could fundamentally change the strategic balance, create a dangerous first strike advantage.
Undermining deterrence.
Yeah.
If you think you can shoot down any retaliation.
Exactly. It erodes that mutual assured destruction concept that arguably has kept a certain peace. This also bumps up against established norms. UN resolutions under Paris Prevention of an Arms Race in outer space, they've built a norm against weaponizing space, even if not strictly binding law yet.
And the Golden Dome challenges that directly.
Plus, there's the dual-use ambiguity. A defensive shield could potentially be used offensively against an adversary's satellites?
Fueling suspicion from China,
And
Russia.
some major space powers, yeah. It definitely raises red flags for them.
Now, where does India fit into this? The article highlights India's dilemma.
Yeah, India's a rising space power, partners with the U.S. on space situational awareness, so tactically aligned, you could say.
But normatively conflicted.
Right. India strongly advocates for peaceful uses of space, equitable governance. Supporting or even tolerating Golden Dome could hurt its credibility there, but not cooperating could strain ties with Washington.
A tricky spot.
And the bigger picture concern, the article warns, is that Golden Dome could normalize the weaponization of outer space.
Triggering an arms race in orbit.
Potentially. A destabilizing cycle. It could force smaller nations towards asymmetric responses, cyber attacks, creating space debris deliberately.
Making space much more dangerous for everyone.
And weakening the Outer Space Treaty itself, turning space into a legal gray zone, or worse, a battlefield.
So what's the call to action? How should we navigate this?
The article positions Golden Dome as a legal inflection point. It urges strategic partners, like India, to push for clarifying and updating the OS2.
Maybe new binding rules against weapons in space.
Yes, advocating for that, plus transparency for military space projects, and ensuring national laws, like India's own Space Activities Bill, have clear guidelines for responsible defense cooperation in space.
So a crucial moment for the future of space governance.
Absolutely. The decisions made now could really shape whether space remains a domain for peaceful exploration or becomes the next conflict zone.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.